Okay. Welcome to the Older Vermonters Caucus. Thanks for being here today. I think I've got this being live streamed. So, yep, says it is up in the corner. Perfect. All right. Welcome. Thanks for being here today. We have James McInerney from the Senator Welch's office, who's going to give an update on what they know is going on down in DC, especially with the Older Americans Act and anything that's come up on Medicaid. But before we get started, just want to give a quick update on H13, which is the home and community-based rate bill that passed second reading yesterday. So that was a good thing. I'll be back on the floor today at 3 for third reading and then off to the Senate. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as we keep going here. So hopefully that will pass this session and make it to the governor's desk soon. It's going to make crossover, so that's really important. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add before we get started. If there's any announcements, real quick, short. Otherwise, I'm just going to turn it over to James.
Great, thank you. Well, so happy to be here today just to kind of share some federal updates with everyone. I see a few faces that I recognize, but for those of you that don't know me, my name is James McInerney. I'm a constituent caseworker and an outreach representative in the office of Senator Welch. I cover issue areas including hunger and nutrition and older Vermonter issues, amongst a host of other things. So really appreciate the opportunity to provide some updates. And, right at the outset, I'll just say I wish I had some more optimistic and hopeful news to share, but at least wanted to kind of present a realistic picture of what we're seeing and hearing in DC, specifically related to Medicaid and to the Older Americans Act. So just wanted to kind of provide some high-level updates. I was able to sync up with our DC team, and I've got a whole kind of list of things to share. So as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, the Senate budget resolution passed out of the Budget Committee about the middle of last week along a straight party line vote, 11-10. Within that budget resolution, there's lots that still needs to be figured out, but it allows for and authorizes a $515 billion deficit increase over 10 years. Although feedback from the House side of things sounds like that number may be somewhere closer to 340 to 350 billion. But either way, it authorizes 85.5 billion in new spending, balanced against a corresponding amount in annual spending cuts. Now, the way that those cuts get assigned, most committees in the Senate were given instructions to identify annual spending cuts, and they started off by setting a very low floor for those spending cuts, which is 1 billion over 10 years. But of course, 1 billion is the minimum, and I think the expectations are that committees are likely to well exceed that 1 billion target over 10 years. So in terms of the primary committees that my boss sits on, we have he's a new member of the Finance Committee in this Congress, along with Senator Sanders. And of course, the Finance Committee oversees Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. They were instructed to reduce spending by 1 billion over 10 years. Our office is hearing that the most likely targets for those funding cuts, as I'm sure some of you have seen in the news, are likely to be in Medicaid and in Social Security block grants. I pulled the funding numbers for fiscal year 2024, and I know that Medicaid was authorized to spend 618 billion in FY24, and the Social Security block grants were authorized for 1.7 billion in the same period. For those of you who don't know those Social Security block grants, I'm sure everyone's familiar with what Medicaid does and the services it provides to lower income older adults, but the Social Security block grants are used to fund programs that support childcare and child welfare services for persons with disabilities, case management services, adult protective services, among other things. So the greatest impacts that we are highly concerned about are going to be the impacts that these cuts will have to low-income older adults receiving care through Medicaid and low-income children and their families who benefit from those Social Security block grant funded programs. Of course, the other committee that the senator sits on that is looking at funding cuts is the Ag Committee, which oversees farm aid programs and SNAP and various food assistance programs. They were likewise given the directive to reduce spending by a minimum of $1 billion over 10 years. And again, our office is hearing the most likely forecasts are cuts to those latter two, to SNAP and food assistance programs. There's some differences of opinion between the House and the Senate about the best way to do those. And there was some encouraging news on the House side of things this week that they don't want to directly reduce SNAP spending, although, they may try to do that with, increasing work requirements or, kind of by hook or by crook processes. So as I said earlier, most committees are likely to well exceed those 1 billion targets. Exact cuts are yet to be worked out. Part of them will be worked out through the process that's about to begin here in the Senate. And then, of course, part of them will have to be worked out through the reconciliation process, which is how, the House and the Senate will have to align their budget proposals. And by all indications, the reconciliation process seems to be how the Republicans in Congress intend on passing this budget, because using the reconciliation process, they will only need a simple majority vote in both houses to pass it, which, of course, they currently have in both houses. There are a couple of other differences between the two budget proposals, but I don't think it's necessarily relevant for this conversation right now, but I'm happy to dive into the details on those later. On the House side of things, and I can speak, a little bit less about this, just kind of secondhand information and research that I've been able to do. They've been a little bit more clear about spending cut levels that they want to see. And the instructions that they've issued to various committees have been to deliver no less than, in total, $1.5 trillion in cuts over 10 years. The largest segment of that directive was to the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which oversees Medicaid and Medicare. And they were instructed to make a mandatory cut of $880 billion over the same period, so about $88 billion per year. Some of the one silver lining is that, not all House Republicans are currently on board with the existing resolution, and it's kind of uncertain what that will look like once it gets finalized. So either which way on our side of things in the Senate, the budget proposal, having been moved out of the Budget Committee, triggers the, and I'm using air quotes you can't see, but triggers the vote-a-rama process, which I think will begin tomorrow. And that consists of a 50-hour period in which senators can offer an unlimited number of amendments to the budget proposal. And this is how I think a lot of the specific cut levels will be determined, at least for the Senate proposal. And then, of course, like I said earlier, it has to be married with whatever finalized proposal the House delivers. But yeah, so senators will be able to offer an unlimited number of amendments to the budget proposal. All of these amendments will be considered, again, by a straight up or down majority vote. In terms of our office, I was speaking to our legislative team. We have a slew of amendments planned specifically to oppose cuts to Medicaid, oppose cuts to Social Security block grants, oppose cuts to SNAP reduction, among many others. And our goal here is to get senators on the record, specifically with a yes or no vote as to whether they support or oppose cutting funding for all of these vital programs, which we know are so important. So that process will begin tomorrow. We should have more information on specific amendments and kind of timing, but it is going to be a very, very quick process. I know our teams down in DC are gearing up for quite a long fight over a lot of those amendments. They weren't able to offer, much in the way of prognostication about, kind of what amendments they expect might stick and what won't. But of course, it feels like I'm saying this a lot these days because we are in the minority, and so much is decided by a simple majority vote. There is not a ton of optimism But again, I think one of the main purposes here is to get folks on the record as to whether they oppose or support cutting funding for Medicaid, for instance, or for food stamps, for SNAP benefits, for instance. So that's kind of just a high level overview of where things stand with funding. We are very, very concerned about what a finalized budget proposal will look like and what the implications are to Medicaid, what the implications are to Social Security block grants and others. We are, as I said, we are working with all of our colleagues. I know that my boss has said many times that it is his job in DC to find areas of agreement and to find effective ways to communicate to all of his colleagues how vital all of these programs are, not just for Vermonters, but for constituents in every state in the country. So I'll just kind of pause there and see if we've got any questions kind of about how the budgeting process is going, any specific questions that I can answer. I'll do my best. And if I don't have the answers, I'm happy to run them up the chain to DC to see if I can track some stuff down for you.
Great, thank you so much. What are you hearing about the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act?
Yeah, so I checked in with our health team, our legislative health team in DC this morning, and they said that they have heard almost no chatter about OAA reauthorization since the House voted it down in December. Again, one of the silver linings there, I think, kind of what we're expecting is with when it comes to OAA reauthorization and Farm Bill reauthorization, this is stuff that Congress will take up once this budget process has been finalized and completed. So I think that it is on the agenda. We don't have any sort of timeline for it yet. The silver lining, I know it's about as silver lining as we're finding these days, but was encouraged with the OAA reauthorization that came out of the Senate, which at least had mostly level set funding with some, minor and modest increases in some areas. But again, the real question mark here is on the House side of things, where there has been, a significant degree of pushback about, funding levels for all these various programs. So unfortunately, I don't have anything substantive to offer on OAA at this time. It's just going to be kind of a wait and see process that we should get much more clarity on once the budget finalization process concludes.
So does that have is that tied to the continuing resolution at all? Do you know? Because that expires on the 13th of March or the 14th of March?
Yeah, I'll have to double check on that. My understanding is that it is tied to the continuing resolution, but again, I believe that both, that was part of the continuing resolution, and so so come March, I really am not sure what exactly is going to happen once that CR expires. But let me just double check on that, and I'll make sure I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's here.
No problem. Thank you so much. And are there any questions? I've got a couple more, but someone out there have a question for James? It's great to have you here, bud. So nice to get kind of exactly what's going on because, of course, sometimes it's hard to follow. Matthew.
Yes, this is Matthew. My biggest question, for the federal government for James is, what's the federal progress on the cuts that you've been seeing, or what Peter Welch, Senator Bernie Sanders, and Becca Balance have been, trying to prevent from the federal I shouldn't say take over from the federal government, but how about these other programs that are, like the broadband that's supposed to be rewarded to Vermont, which is on freeze, that 224 million, which is supposed to be broadband access, but also others, that are, like I said, that Vermont can get by, but that big one is, with other, when that Peter Welch's and Becca Ballant and Bernie Sanders are very concerned that the other federal, funds, that help Vermont survive, it may be, how can the federal delegation protect, those remaining funds. We got other funds out there that's already in the works. How can our remaining federal delegation, protect those funds from being either stopped, freeze, or halted altogether to make sure that we are rewarded these grants regardless whether the freeze is in place or what the president says. Most of these grants are already rewarded to the states. And are there
Yeah,
any updates, about how that's going in Washington? Because I hear that, that's a pretty strenuous fight going on down there
Yeah.
because, it's just, if it's
yeah.
from what Trump says, it's my way or the highway routine, but most of it, but Vermont survives on mostly 80 to 90% on federal funds. But also what the other problem is concerns is, we have
Matthew,
allies in the north. So
I
just,
think,
yeah.
Matthew, so I think you're just wondering about like money that's been promised to Vermont in grants. I mean, I think we see it across broadband, transportation, many other parts of state government. Are those all in play, James? Or could we, still rely on a lot of those federal grants that we've already been awarded?
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, we are, to be honest, we are very, very concerned about the status of those grants as we are about just the onslaught of likely unconstitutional and illegal executive orders that we've seen issued from the White House in the previous weeks. I know that we have met, we've met with a lot of stakeholders around the state that receive funding. We had a meeting late last month with VCBB to discuss kind of the status of that funding and recommended some just kind of some strategic changes that they may be able to make in order to in order to, I think, make the case that that there is no reason to continue with any freezes on those funding allotments. But I think one of the things, I mean, all three delegation offices have been very, very on record about the fact that that a lot of these funding freezes are likely not legal and are likely not constitutional. I mean, this is money that Congress has appropriated, and we're seeing this sort of play out right now in the judiciary, where we have had multiple orders from multiple courts issuing injunctions and ordering that freezes be lifted to varying degrees. And so to some degree that is a process that is going to have to play out in the courts. And I think that still there is there's a lot of concern about what happens if if those court orders get ignored. And I think to kind of call a spade a spade. I mean, it is a reality that we are likely on the verge of a constitutional crisis if the president doesn't want to comply with with direct orders from the judiciary. So it's something that we are paying very, very close attention to, and one thing that we are certainly certainly want to get the word out and want to make sure. And I'm going to put my contact information in the chat here. But the most vital thing that we're really asking for right now is open two-way communication. I mean, certainly, you folks are hearing and seeing different things than our office is through the work that you do, and making sure that we are aware of how these various executive orders and funding freezes are impacting the work that you do and what you're seeing and hearing in your communities. It is absolutely critical that we are up to date on all of that stuff. And so like I said, I'll put my contact info in the chat, but would encourage anyone and everyone to reach out with direct impacts that they're seeing within their communities.
Yeah, thank you. So just wondering what the budget cycle is with the Older Americans Act. So for instance, we have drawn down our existing funds through the OAA. What happens, like when would be able to bring the money, when would our next drawdown be able to happen for the OAA? And I'm not sure if you have an answer to this, or I see Jason's on here, Angela, nope. Yeah, just throwing it out there, like what's the budget cycle for the OAA that funds our Meals on Wheels programs here in Vermont?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm gonna have to I'll have to follow up with you directly on that. Just need to check with my ledge team in DC to get a sense on that, but happy to do some digging for you and get back to you with some more information.
Okay,
I can speak to that a little, Rep Noise.
thank you, Jason.
This is Jason Palapita, a State Human Agent Director. So as it stands now, Dale has received Dale is basically like on track right now for receiving all of the drawdown funding related to the Old Americans Act, funding that we receive. As far as I know, we've drawn down approximately 45% of funds, and given that it's on a federal fiscal year, which starts in October, that's pretty much, we're like right on where we should be as far as how we typically get that money. I think, as we've been discussing, the big question is, once that continuing resolution, if it in fact it comes to a dead stop on March 14th, then and there's no continuing resolution again that includes the current OAA reauthorization, then that's where the federal funding would essentially come to a stop. So the key is having the OAA continue into another continuing resolution, if that makes sense, after March 15th.
Yes.
Okay, after March
so
15th.
if there's another CR, then we can continue to draw down funds based on when the end date of that continuing resolution is.
Correct.
But we've already drawn down the maximum that we're allowed to under the continuing resolution that we have now.
Yes.
Okay. So does Dale have any ability to keep these programs going if there is no continuing resolution? And that might be a question for the Appropriations Committee here.
Yeah. I guess I'll say that we would definitely have to figure out a way to leverage state funding to prioritize what we would consider the most significant OAA programs. So, for example, the home delivered meals programs, congregate meals, and then after that, figure out how best to budget for the other OAA services that are being provided.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Kaylee's here from the Long-Term Care Ombudsman, whose funding is also in the OAA. So definitely some important funding things are going to be happening here in the next, sadly, 3 weeks, basically. Okay. Are there any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, you have to unmute. I can help. Hang on, I might be able to unmute you. I'll give it a try. Maybe not.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
I came late, so I don't know if you addressed long-term care in Medicaid. Is that part of what he's talking about by cutting Medicaid? Is he also talking about cutting long-term care Medicaid?
Yeah, I think that that all of the programs that Medicaid offers are going to be up for very serious review for funding reductions. I think that some of this, as I was kind of mentioning earlier, the way that the budgeting process will work, a lot of this stuff is yet to be determined. we don't have specific programs yet or funding amounts that have been identified for cuts. Those will be identified through this vote-a-rama period where senators are going to offer amendments to the Senate budget proposal. Of course, the House is going to have to go through their own separate process, and then they're going to attempt to bring those two bills together to match into one bill that will just be passed through the continuing or through the reconciliation. But yeah, I mean, my fear, I know we are very concerned that we are just going to see broad spectrum cuts to Medicaid and lots of services that fall under that umbrella. But as of right now, we don't have specific programs or funding levels. Those have not been identified yet, but we should know a lot more, probably, I would say, by this time next week about what specific impacts will be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, James, for your time. I really appreciate you coming today. Looks like we got one more. We got a question from Andrea here. Fire away, Andrea.
Hi. So I just wanted to say that a legal expert that I follow on social media had this to say yesterday about the Fifth Circuit's decision not to respond to the state's suit to issue a temporary restraining order against Musk and Doge and what they're doing, and they did not do that. Her perspective is that, in fact, they gave some really good guidance, and this is something that we can all be doing, that to issue a TRO, the states or the plaintiffs need to show irreparable harm that is beyond remediation. So all of us gathering both data and stories can share that information with Senator Welch's office, Senator Sanders' office, Representative Ballant's office, and the Attorney General of Vermont as a plaintiff, again, because basically what the Fifth Circuit said was, we can't issue the TRO based on the evidence you've provided today, but we do see that this exists as a potential. And yeah, so I just want to say it's really important that all of us are documenting, and it's terrible that we're going to have to document harm in order to repair it, but that's where we're at. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. And I know that Treasurer Pichek is also working on, keeping track of the impact it has here in Vermont. And I've actually connected with him about maybe just finding some time from him or someone from his staff to kind of come to the Older Vermonters Caucus, as we keep going on this. So I'll circle back with him as well. Yeah. Anything else? I wish this was some good news. But we'll do our best down here. I'm going to be in House Appropriations today, and I'll be bringing up some of this when I talk to them. They probably already know, but doesn't hurt to say it again. And then yeah.
Well,
all right.
Yeah, one more question there.
Yep, I see Deanna's hand. Go ahead, Deanna.
Well, I just wondered if we had any idea. It seems our funding in the short term really depends on the next continuing resolution. Do you have any sense of how likely that is to happen, that there will be a continuing resolution, or are you concerned that there wouldn't be? And will we know anything before March 14th?
Well, I think, I mean, at this point, when I spoke with our Ledge team this morning, they said that there had been at least no indication in the committees or from Senate leadership that it's on the timeline. I think that but I think that that's more of a function of the fact that everyone is really focused on the budget resolutions right now and getting this process completed. I do think that I think that once we're through the budget process here, I mean, I know that the Senate has already passed, you know, their reauthorization. I mean, whether it's a continuing resolution or a reauthorization, you know, certainly the Senate has a plan in place, had a plan in place that they passed back in December, which the House voted down. You know, so there's just going to have to be some, there's going to have to be some real advocacy, you know, both on our part and, you know, on your parts as well, to make sure that, you know, that this is a top level priority once the budget, you know, budget process plays out and gets finalized here. But as of right now, unfortunately, no, we don't have any sense of when, you know, either out of the committees or Senate leadership is, there's just been no indication that, you know, they're ready to immediately start working on it. Certainly, we are very concerned about the lapse in funding, and it's something that, you know, I know across the whole congressional delegation here, that we're prepared to advocate for strongly. You know, and I do know as well, you know, I know, of course, Senator Sanders sits on the Help Committee, which has oversight over the OAA. And, you know, I think that their office may be able to provide a little bit more insight as to what discussions have happened within that committee. It's just not something that our office is at least privy to at this point.
Yeah, definitely we'll follow up with Senator Sanders' office, but thank you. And all right. Well, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you all again for the opportunity to you know, just kind of come and provide what updates I have. I likewise wish that that I had you know, better and more optimistic news to share. But you know, it is I mean, it just is, you know, have to call a spade a spade. It is just a very trying and challenging time right now. But you know, we certainly appreciate and really need the support and the feedback, and you know, those stories, you know, about the direct impacts that that this stuff is going to have across the state. You know, that is the stuff that that really helps us do our work, helps my boss do his work in DC. And so I'm going to drop my contact info in the chat, and just would encourage, you know, any of you with any sort of follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out and be in touch. I want to make sure we've got open lines of communication as we're going through the process here.
Great. Thanks again for taking the time to come and talk to us today. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you all.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
All right. Anything else anyone wants to bring up today? I actually have another bill presentation up in government operations, so that's where I'm off to. But anybody, just anything bringing up? I wish we had better news. We can all stick together on a lot of this that's going on, and I know it's definitely hard to think about, where our people that we're serving are so reliant on these nutrition programs and programs that are funded by the OAA. So just we'll move forward with it. Hopefully we'll be able to have another CR, and then they'll come to some sort of an agreement. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.